My name is Jennifer Foster. I've designed a method to understand how people work called the energy dynamic model, a simple way to understand everyone without exception. More details of this idea can be found in these two books. Today I'm going to do my talk from the stop before nowhere in front of the wall, looking at autism. Now, for reference, I personally do not believe in any label. People are people as far as I'm concerned, and we are here to be human. And often a person who is autistic will be given this label because of a few reasons. Firstly, because of who they are. Secondly, because they are very, very creative and focused, and for some reason mainstream society does not seem to value or nurture this type of person, and it's almost as if you are creative and if you are very absorbed in things, that is, the picture is being painted that is actually an issue. As to whether or not this is social engineering is subject matter for another video. But most people with an autistic label, it is because of who they are, because of how they are, and is also as well, this is so important, because they are probably very, very anxious, and a lot of the traits of autism are also exactly the same as anxiety. So what I do with a client is, first of all, to remove anxiety, because anxiety masks what is really going on. And what I've found in my personal experience of working in this field for many, many years is that once you put someone, anyone actually, in a position where they are not anxious, their mental health improves, they become much better at being who they are, they feel better. Now the situation is changed. It is at that point, and only at that point, you can start to investigate what's actually going on. But until you've removed the anxiety and the mental health aspects of this, to me, you cannot see what's going on. Okay? So without further ado, I'm going to use pencil sketches to explain another way, a different way of understanding autism. Here is a line. A usual person approach to understanding and learning and knowledge will be to know lots of things, but not very deeply. They will be able to take orders, they will be able to be successful, they will learn something and get the right answer, and they will follow the general rules of society. This means they will be operating in what I call the mind dynamic. And these people, as I said, know lots and lots of things, but really they are just processing things in their mind. They are not actually experiencing what they feel and who they are. Now, when someone is good at being in the mind dynamic, and when I mean good, I mean succeeds in education and work, they get lots of ticks. They get ticks from their employer, they get ticks from their teacher, they get ticks from their parents for being a well-behaved person, a rule follower, and someone who does what they're told. Now this, if they're in the mind dynamic, these ticks are experienced like little sparks of fire. Fire is a very good way to understand the nature of mind energy, which in essence is emotion, okay? And you get hit, 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 hit. A bit like if you set a goal, you get a target. You set a target and you reach your goal. Tick. Yeah, it's a little buzz. See if you can start to experience that buzz, buzz, buzz. Okay? And this person goes along in their life collecting ticks, given what other people think they should do, and they may spend all their life being like this if they're successful. Lots of information on this in these books. However, the person who is labelled with autism is different. They operate in a different way. Although, as I said earlier, a mind dynamic person can be shown how to drop this habit. Now, someone who is labelled autistic, will probably be more like this. They don't know all this stuff, because they're much too busy investigating something much more important on a much deeper level. And this is to do with who they are. This is to do with who they are. It's got nothing to do with what people think they should be looking at. So the who they are will be their innate talent, gift, ideas and creation. Now everyone has this in them, everyone, but most people don't access it because they're too busy tick collecting, okay? But someone who is autistic will focus on this. Now, because where we focus is so important because it creates our experience of life. If you can imagine, if a person is focusing here, yeah, here, they are not, and they are doing it at this deep level. They're doing it at a very deep level, yeah, very deep level. They haven't really got time or energy to focus on the more superficial things that are up here, okay, that are on the tick, the mind level. So they will probably start to get crosses. So for example, if they're really absorbed in something here, yeah, and they're at school and the lesson finishes, but they've been really absorbed in it, they won't want to leave the lesson. They won't want to leave the lesson because they will be connected onto that deep level and they will be experiencing that. So to actually suddenly cut that off will be a very painful experience for them. However, other people don't realise this because they're not operating on that level. So they will say to that child or that person, right, stop now, we're going. That person will not be able to do that, so will not behave correctly, okay? So they will get a cross. So unless this person is able to do this, the experience of life they'll get is a very negative one from other people. And over time, those crosses, that's that negative experience from other people, will start to create what I call sad feelings, which is the beginning of mental health problems. So you can see that unless that person is in an environment where this is valued and appreciated, they will very quickly become very negative mind experience and will start to have symptoms of anxiety, okay? To make this person feel good, we have to appreciate and value where they are, and they are here, and being here could be being engrossed in music, in maths, in anything, in cooking, in patterns, anything. They are on a zone where they are creating. When we are in the mind dynamic, collecting our ticks, okay, up here again, I work for an hour for you, you give me £10, yeah? So I've worked for an hour, that's one, you've given me £10, that's another one, and we are equal, so that's 11. So 1 plus 1 makes 11. 1 hour, £1 that's what you get. If you're operating on what I call the feeler dynamic, here, actually you'll have an idea, and from that idea will come something completely spectacular and different from the original place that you were coming from. So down here, 1 and 1 actually makes 2. 1 and 1 actually makes 2. And this is why, this is human genius. This is human genius, this is inspiration, this is creation. So someone who's on this level, and as I said, anyone can be on this level, anyone can be, okay? But most people who are on this level are very, very human and suffer a lot in this society, which is why they become anxious, which is why it's very difficult for them to do this, because you need to be in a good place to actually do this, generally speaking. But they will create something that is outstanding and take one idea, add it to something else, and then create a 2, which is a completely different in essence to the 2 ones. So the mind dynamic is very linear, but the who you are, the feeler dynamic, is creative. So if someone is existing down here, concentrating on who they are, being creative, but getting loads of negative stuff from everything else because they're not behaving as they should, things get very, very noisy for this person. This is because the way the brain works is once it works in one way in one part of your life, it will probably work in that way in all parts of your life. So because this person has become very, very deep, everything about them is deep, including their senses. So they will be very, very sensitive to sight, smell, hearing, noise, that sort of thing, which is why, again, a lot of autistic people are said to have sensory issues. Basically, because they are very, very deep and very, very aware, basically, it's not an issue, it's an awareness. Because of this, they will find unnatural environments quite noisy and quite difficult, and they won't be able to concentrate. And because they won't be able to concentrate, they won't be able to grab onto who they are. And if they can't grab onto who they are, that makes them even more anxious. Okay, so the sensory overload is because of the way their brain is set up to operate. So let's go back to the point where, until we can understand anxiety, it's quite hard to often find out what's really going on within a person. And this next section can be used to understand anyone, not just people on the autistic spectrum. Because of what we've already discussed, our diagram of people, how people operate who are on an autistic spectrum, as I said, we can see that if the person is not allowed to operate within this place, then they will experience lots of crosses from other people and from their life in general. As I said earlier, over time this leads to sad feelings. Now if you can imagine, when we're in the mind dynamic, a tick and a cross, as I said earlier, is like emotion. It can be seen as like fire, and a positive one is a fire bang, and a negative one is a fire anxiety. Okay, we'll come back to that in a minute. But if you understand, a feeling is completely different. A feeling can be experienced and is experienced through reality and through how you feel in your sort of gut, sort of feeling area in your stomach. It's your inner strength. It's where you feel. And this is what you feel no matter what is going on in the mind dynamic. And a lot of people, if they're getting lots of ticks in their mind dynamic, are cut off from what they feel. So often they don't even know if they feel good or if they feel bad, because they're not really experiencing life as a human being in this way. They are more reacting to the outside world in a very mind orientated processing manner. So if you imagine your feelings are more like water, they're not like fire, they're like water, and they stay with you and they're carried with you. And a sad feeling is like dark water and makes you feel heavy. A light feeling is a peaceful feeling and is like sparkling water, and that's stored in your stomach area too. And if someone is able to be who they are, and they are showing love, and they are appreciated and valued, this gives them a good feeling in your stomach area. I'm sure you've experienced that when someone's given you a hug, or you know that you're loved. That's what I'm talking about. Now, if someone is not able to be nurtured and given lots of sparkling water in their stomach area, and they operate from a feeler dynamic, which is where most people in the autistic spectrum are operating, they will feel sad if they get lots of crosses and they're not valued and they're not able to express who they are. So they'll feel more and more and more squashed, smaller and smaller and smaller, and they won't be able to go into their mind because they're getting crosses, and they won't be able to express who they are because they're getting a sad feeling from that. Now, if that sad feeling is allowed to stay with that person, it turns into a bad feeling eventually, and that is when anxiety kicks in. Now, if you can think of a sad, bad feeling, is like a bottle inside your goldfish bowl of sparkling water. It's like a bottle of Coke with all sad feelings, but you're carrying it around with you all the time. And sometimes what happens is, if something that happens around that person that is a memory of that sad, bad feeling that they're still carrying around, that bottle of Coke will fizz up and go into the mind, and the mind will take over, and suddenly that person will become very, very anxious. So the more a person is not able to express who they are, the more likely they are to have sad, bad feelings carried around with them, and the more likely they are then to become anxious when something happens around them that reminds them of where they got their sad feelings from in the first place. Now, some of the less common symptoms of anxiety are as follows. I've written these down for you. If a person or a child is not listening, if they become quite angry quite quickly, if they have OCD tendencies, and I mean they want to put things in an order, they want to line things up, if they are quite controlling of you and manipulate you, if they show signs of PDA, pathological demand avoidance, or signs of ADHD, these are often hugely to do with a person being anxious. And as I said earlier, until you get rid of the anxiety, you don't really know what's going on. You don't really know how much is it the person being like this, or how much is it a person who has anxiety being like this. So if we can get rid of this anxiety, what often happens in my experience, people start to listen, they become less angry less often, they start to not be so controlling, they start to take responsibility for themselves and to do things for themselves, and they can pay attention more quickly. They are better at paying attention to things. This is all because of what we said earlier, whereby if a person on the autistic spectrum, or anyone, but let's say a person on the autistic spectrum, is not able to get in to that place here where they feel good, where they're doing their thing and they're expressing, they're creating, if they're not able to stay here and they're carrying sad and bad feelings, when they're booted up into their mind because they're not able to be here, when they're booted up into their mind, they'll look around at the world around them and they'll think, do you know what? I don't like this. And that's anxiety. I think modern society has got a lot to answer for here. I don't think suddenly, over the last 5 to 10 years, suddenly people have become, as a species, less functional and more likely to have some sort of mental health problem or learning difficulty. I do not believe that. I think a lot of this has got to do with modern society and how it affects us as human beings. And as I said at the beginning of the video, often people with an autistic spectrum label are often, for whatever reason, more human and feel more than the more usual person who is going around their life not really paying attention much to what they feel, but more running from a mind dynamic and doing what they should. I do think this is very interesting, and I think it's a sign that people are losing themselves in modern society and forgetting who they are and forgetting how to feel, whereas people on the autistic spectrum have not forgotten that. And I'd just like to say a few words on that topic. If you look around you at today's modern society, it is actually actually very, very unnatural, and it is actually quite a bizarre place to be in. And children, especially very, very young children, do pick this up straight away. And the idea of separation from mothers, of separation with their family, of time spent on IT, computers, and I'm going to talk about that more in another section now, and the fact that we spend a lot of time in supermarkets, where it's all very bright light and artificial lines and funny sounds and funny noises, and even the fact that we spend a lot of time in the car and watching television. All those influences are enough to send someone who is sensitive and a real human being and a feeling human being, that is enough from a very, very early age for someone to actually start to cut off from society, because basically it's too much. It doesn't make sense and it's too much. So this could be, I'm not saying this is 100%, but it could be one reason why people on the autistic spectrum have a sort of label attached to them, that they are very cut off from their feelings. Now, I would argue that that's not the case. They are not cut off from their feelings, but because when they are in touch with who they are and their feelings and they're experiencing our world, it's so much and or doesn't make sense that they just withdraw. They just withdraw. And this can add to the fact that they might not speak very much, they might not communicate very much. And again, it's very interesting, because if you work with someone and you do start to be able to nurture them and to allow them to come and be who they are, and that's valued, and they stop becoming so anxious and they stop cutting off, people do learn much more, and they do start to communicate, and they do start to become able to be connected with. And it's remarkable how this happens. I'd like to spend a few moments looking at what the use of computers, iPads and playing games has on people from an energetic point of view, and with special reference to people on the autistic spectrum. Let's go back to the beginning again and remember that we were talking about mind energy, which is like fire, and feel energy, which is like water. So if you imagine that this is a stick person, you have your feelings here, which can just be described as like water, because it's quiet, it's deep, it's still, it's strong, and you're carrying it in its peace, sparkling or sad, dark water, okay? And you also have energy from your mind, which is like fire, it's like an emotion, okay? Now people, and I discussed this in these books, operate in one of four energy dynamics. Either the spiritual dynamic, which I haven't talked about today, spiritual dynamic, mind dynamic, which is very, very common, 90% of people are in their mind dynamic, or feeler dynamic. And there's two types. There's the negative feeler, which is people who are depressed, sad, can't express who they are, but that's where they live, that's where they're getting their energy from, and that's how they're experiencing life. And a positive feeler, which is someone who can be who they are, who has found people and places they can be valued and loved in, who can create. And because they're so full of sparkling water and so aware, their mind calms down, and they don't need to have any ticks or crosses really, because they're finding all their energy from being who they are and creating. And that is the ultimate, really optimal human being. And anyone can be like that. Depending on where they are coming from, it's a different journey for everyone. But this is what I talk about in the books and in my courses. Anyway, so that's really how people work, either from their mind dynamic or from their feel. Okay, As I said, there's a little bit on spirit, but I'm not going to talk about that in this series of videos. But what happens when we introduce technology? What happens when we start to have computers, computer games, Facebook, goodness knows what, virtual reality, and learning on a computer? Now what happens is that obviously isn't a field. That is obviously not a field, because you're just sitting there. Okay, whatever you think about computers, you are just sitting there. Even if you're doing a Wii game, you're moving, but you're still plugged in. So you're sitting there and you're plugged in. Immediately that means you are not feeling and doing and process. You're not feeling and doing and experiencing. You're not. This is the realm of experiencing life here. Yeah? On a computer you're not experiencing life. You might think you are, because what you're doing is you're processing that information that you're getting from a computer through your mind. So you're immediately in your mind, you're immediately put in to the mind dynamic, and you start to process information. Okay? Now a computer is in that zone, but the energy is different to fire. And what I would like you to imagine is that the energy is like a solar panel. So imagine you've got a solar panel on your head, right? Now, rather than being like a tick, which is a fire from a person, I've got approval, I've hit a goal, yes, short, sharp, bang, bang, need another one, which is why it's so addictive. If you have a solar panel on your head, number one, you've always got it there. So you've always got it. It's a very kind of fuzz. It's a warm fuzz. Yeah? And number two, if the sun is shining, if the computer's on, you're getting constant feedback. So it's like having a warm pad on your head. So I can illustrate this by doing that. Now, if you imagine you give a young child that, or you even give an adult that, isn't that nice? It will feel nice as physically, and you'll have this constant energy coming in a nice gentle way. It won't be a tick that you have to go and find approval from. It won't be a feel where you're experiencing doing and being and loving. It's a nice warm fuzz on your head. Now children and people get used to it very, very quickly, and it's very, very subtle. And what happens when you take it off? This is why children have tantrums, because suddenly you've taken off their nice warm fuzz. Suddenly. And not only do they lose their nice warm fuzz, but they've probably within that nice warm fuzz, they're getting a plastic tick. This is what my little boy calls it. If you imagine a tick from a human being, like my friend says, wow, you look good, tick, I look good, tick. That's from a person, that's a fire, wood, burning fire, yeah? But if a computer tells me that on Facebook because I get a like, it's like a plastic tick. So it's like a toxic tick. It will burn, it's the same energy as a wooden tick, but it's a plastic, chemically kind of different experience tick, added to the fact it's within the solar panel. So can you see how artificial and plastic everything is becoming? And you can compare that to knowledge as well. With knowledge, doing, being, feel, water, I am who I am, and I know because I am. Digging, eating, cooking, making love, listening to music, creating music, having an idea. That's real human being big stuff. Mind, sitting in the classroom, regurgitating, processing, we think, we don't know, we think. but it's still registering. It is still registering, especially if we stay in the mind dynamic. We're okay, all right, if we're successful. But from a computer, you've gone into that world, and all the knowledge you're getting is given that world, which again is, it's all smoke and mirrors, plastic ticks and solar panels. Right, that's what happens on an energetic and knowledgeable point of view. That's what happens with IT. That's what it does to you. And it actually rewires your brain. It rewires your energy dynamic, and that is extremely dangerous. And I will do other videos on that topic, because what it's doing is it's taking you away from who you are and your human essence. You are losing your humanness. And the more you rely on this warm, fuzzy, solar panel energy, rather than a mind energy or a feel energy, the more you rely on that, the more your brain is programmed to seek it. And the more you're living a virtual reality, really. And eventually you can't take your who you are humanness with you. You can't, because it's based here in reality, real human stuff. You can't take that into virtual reality. And if you get too programmed into virtual reality, you lose yourself, and it will kind of become absorbed. So imagine what is happening to your children and your people when you give them computers to play with. Now, interestingly, a lot of people say, yes, but it calms my child down. Now, of course it does. And I think you probably know now why it does. It will calm them down, because if you stick a solar panel on their head and they're getting this nice warm fuzzy energy, they're ignoring ticks and crosses, and they're ignoring what they feel. So of course it will calm them down, because everything else is being ignored. And what happens is the more you use it to calm them down, or teach as well, teaching is another one, you can actually teach whatever you can teach on a computer in real life, and I'll leave it at that. You can teach what you can teach on a computer in real life, okay? Now, with most people, you put them on a computer, fuzzy solar panel, it does calm them down, it does distract them, because that's what it's there for. They're picking up different energy, they're picking up different information. And actually, as we said, plastic ticks are easy to score on a computer game. It's easy to score a tick. I've got this car, I'm going to change the wheels, I get a present, I can talk to people. It tick, tick, tick. They're all plastic ticks. They're not real ticks. And before the advent of IT and all this, in the last 5 to 10 years, I used to think being a tick collector was a bit dodgy. But now, being a tick collector, to me, is better than being a plastic tick addict. Because a plastic tick addict gets all the ticks they can possibly ever want online. Through AI, artificial intelligence, giving it to you. So you're being given it by an algorithm. You're being given a plastic tick by an algorithm. I hope this has been really useful for you to understand certain elements of people, human beings, and sort of fellow people who have been labelled with an autistic spectrum label. What can you do about it? How can you improve the situation? Well, I would suggest that knowledge is power, and I think it's great that you've watched this video, because I'm hoping that will give you a good place to start from. Look at the environment your child is in, look at who they are, look at what they love to do. See if you can start to see the world through their eyes rather than your eyes and what they should be doing. And I've created a lot of videos and written a couple of books that can help you understand this a little bit more. I've developed a course called A Mind Through a Child's Eyes, and the first 4 lessons are free, and it tells you much more how to nurture a child from this energy dynamic point of view. So it's not really a course on parenting, it's more how to understand who a child is, understand more about these ticks and these crosses, understand more about who you are and the feelings, and to see how you can nurture that child. And it doesn't matter whether they're on the autistic spectrum or not. Everyone, as I said, to me is a human being, and we all actually operate in the same way. It's just that we have different who we are's and different dynamics, but we are fundamentally human still, thank goodness. So you could have a look at the A Mind Through a Child's Eyes free taster course, which you can find on www.energydynamic.co.uk. You could also buy a book. This book is £7 and is the basics of the energy dynamic model, and why what we're told, here we are, and why what we're told in society as the answer is not the solution. So if we want to become better human beings and feel better and find peace within ourselves, no matter what your situation, this book explains how it's got to this state. And this book is a practical guide and goes into great detail about lots of the topics I've mentioned in this video. It's got quite large font, so you can see. It's got a 10-page glossary at the back which explains some of the terms I use, and it talks in great detail about the feeler dynamic, the mind dynamic, the spiritual dynamic. It explains how to understand your mind. It explains how to build up your inner strength. It looks at self-harm. It looks at abuse. It looks at depression. It looks at OCD. Looks at eating disorders, but it also looks at how to be successful and how to create something out of nothing. So it's really a useful book, and every now and then I refer you to a free course that I've developed. I've developed at least 4 free courses covering different aspects of this idea that you can find if you go onto the website www.energydynamic.co.uk. So this book's £12, this book's £7. You can do an online course, or if you're local to Coleshley, you could pop down to the Stop Before Nowhere project and have a chat with myself or my friend Jane, who's helping me run it. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this interesting way of understanding how people operate in the modern society. And I would love to see you on the course, and I'd love it if you could buy a book. But if not, you take care, look after yourself, and remember that it is possible to find peace within yourself, no matter what your situation. So please hang on and grab on to that solid, special, who you are essence, because you've been created to be like that, and that's what you need to be doing. So thank you very much. And take care. Bye bye for now.